of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, called on all Venezuelan people to offer their absolute support to the Bolivarian National Armed Forces during his review of the military community brigades. The 6th China-Latin America High-Level Defense Forum was held in Beijing with growing condemnation of the United States' aggressive operations in the Caribbean. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed the need for recognition of the Palestinian State. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos. I'm from the teleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. We begin with the information. The president of Venezuela, Nicolás Maduro, led on Thursday the review of the work of the military communal brigades for education and health miles. In this context, he called on all Venezuelan people to offer their absolute support to the Bolivarian National Armed Forces, which are deployed in defense of the sovereignty and security of the Venezuelan Caribbean in the face of the recent U.S. threats. The Bolivarian president highlighted the military drills carried out in the country's territorial waters as a way to reaffirm the nation's legitimate right to protect its territory. He also denounced the false narratives promoted by the U.S. government and warned there is an imperialist plan to bring about a change of government in Venezuela. And we stay in Venezuela because supermarket shelves are filled with products made in the country, a reality that the imperial media does not show, and that is reflected not only in the figures but also in the feelings of its inhabitants. Andrea Romero tells us more.
En los últimos años, la economía venezolana ha experimentado una transformación.
In recent years, the Venezuelan economy has undergone a significant transformation, with the bolivar regaining ground as the main currency and the supply of domestic products, which translates into confidence and growing independence.
On supermarket shelves, 90% of products are domestically produced, which deserves applause.
El 95% de las transacciones hoy son en bolívares, nuestra moneda nacional.
95% of transactions today are in bolivars, our national currency, and as of yesterday, according to the latest information, 30 supermarkets have opened throughout the country in 2025. With a goal of 40 stores for this year, compared to 61 in 2024.
According to analyst Raymond Martinez, this is the result of macroeconomic policies focused on strengthening the use of the local currency rather than foreign currencies.
We are building confidence in the bolivar again through monetary policies aimed at reducing consumption and trade related to currency issues, and by promoting technical advice through banking services. Everything related to digital commerce, making room for everything related to promoting the use of the current currency, which is the bolivar.
Congressman Ramon Lobo details how this steady growth in Venezuelan production has been sustained despite external threats.
Hell, since the third quarter of 2021, the productive apparatus has been growing at a gross rate. Let us remember that this has been motivated by the sanctions scheme that was established in Venezuela in response to a systematic and psychological campaign whose primary objective is to intimidate and sow anxiety among the Venezuelan people. This also has a clear and definite objective, which is to immobilize the productive apparatus. They seek to paralyze economic agents by creating negative expectations of uncertainty and insecurity.
La estabilidad económica
Economic stability has a direct impact on citizens by giving them greater access to a wider range of products in supermarkets.
Productos venezolanos, bueno, tenías la harina.
There are Venezuelan products. We have flour, rice, pasta, grains, butter. I think there is a lot of variety.
Venezuela avanza
Venezuela moves toward greater economic independence and sovereignty.
en la cámara de José Luis Briceño, Andrea Romero, teleSUR, Caracas, Venezuela.
We continue now with other topics. In Colombia, President Gustavo Petro officially handed over 18,000 hectares of land to approximately 5,000 farmers from the Magdalena Medio region. The land transfer ceremony took place at the Ventura Castillo Coliseum in the western department of Caldas. This action represents a significant step towards agrarian reform in the country, a commitment that Petro considers crucial to democratizing land ownership and combating rural inequality. The president emphasized that in the context of historical violence related to land tenure, it is urgent to guarantee a productive and peaceful future for Colombian farmers. And meanwhile, in Ecuador, on Thursday night, President Daniel Noboa decreed a curfew after the Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities called for protest against the increase in diesel prices. The call for action has the support of trade unions and professional associations throughout the country, as well as other groups. And the presidential decree, which further restricts fundamental rights, limits mobility from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. local time in 7 provinces. The measure suspends freedom of assembly and restricts movement for 60 days. It also authorizes the armed forces and the national police to prevent and disrupt gatherings in public spaces where threats to security are identified. And Argentinian officials have seized assets worth approximately $1.34 million from the late football legend Diego Maradona's sister, his former attorney Matias Morla, and 3 other individuals. The court alleges fraudulent management of Maradona's brand and assets, claiming Morla's business was a front, while Maradona's retained control until his death in the year 2020. The sisters involved are Rita and Claudia, who, along with a notary, face prosecution as accomplices in this case. The legal fight over Maradona's estate began when 2 of his daughters, Dalma and Janina, first accused Morla and others in 2021. Maradona's children assert that the player's brand and subsidiaries should have been transferred to them after his passing. And now we have a short break coming up. But first, remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. We continue with more information. On Friday, the 6th China-Latin America High-Level Defense Forum was held in Beijing with growing condemnation of the United States' aggressive operations in the Caribbean. The meeting took place in the framework of the Xiangshan Forum with the participation of defense and military officials from China and 18 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean who pledged deeper cooperation on security matters. The event is relevant in light of the tensions generated by the nuclear-capable warfare contingent that the United States has deployed in the region. Beijing has called on Washington to stop forcing Latin American countries to choose sides and demands respect for the sovereignty and independence of each nation.
Entre los temas de debate se encuentran el sistema de gobernanza de la seguridad mundial, la cooperación en materia de
And meanwhile, on Thursday, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum and Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney agreed to join forces to defend the trade agreement between Mexico, the United States, and Canada, also known as the USMCA, from threats and uncertainty coming from the White House. Although the governments of Canada and Mexico acknowledge that the protectionism that the United States is attempting to impose on the world foreshadows complex negotiations, they are committed to the treaty in 2026. Both the President and the Prime Minister are engaged to an alliance to cooperate on the future and consolidation of the treaty. And in this regard, Sheinbaum and Carney emphasized that North America is a very important region in the global economy and will seek to ensure that the alliance benefits their countries, for which they have designed a common strategy. And we go now to Panama's soaring debt, a record budget, and warnings from international rating agencies are creating a perfect economic storm that is hitting Panamanians directly in the pocketbook. Our colleague Reka Chandiramani tells us more.
Un alto nivel de endeudamiento del país.
The country's high level of debt has been setting off alarms for years, but with one aggravating factor, the trend has reversed. It is no longer debt for public works, but to pay current expenses. Next year, the Panamanian government will allocate a record $3.661 billion just to pay off a debt that has grown by 152% in the last 5 years.
Una deuda que creció un 152% en los últimos 5 años.
Un aumento inédito.
An unprecedented increase in public debt has tripled the debt service, that is, what we pay in interest, substantially reducing the resources available to the 3 branches of government and autonomous institutions, including the executive, legislative, and judicial branches.
En instituciones autónomas, eso incluye el ejecutivo, el legislativo y el judicial.
Y ese ahogo financiero del Estado significa menos.
And that financial strangulation of the state means less money for essential services. It is resources that vanish from healthcare, classrooms, and public infrastructure. The 2026 budget is the highest in history, at $34.901 billion, a figure equivalent to 6 canal expansions, but at the same time it proposes the most severe cuts to social spending in years. In other words, the money, or chen, as the president calls it, is there, but not for Panamanians. But why does a growing economy not generate the resources to avoid this suffocation?
Pero ¿por qué una economía que crece no genera los recursos para evitar esta asfixia?
Lo que pasa es que el crecimiento de la economía se da.
The thing is that economic growth is fundamentally driven by the logistics sector, that is, the sector linked to the international market. This is not reflected in the domestic sector for several reasons. Firstly, because wages are artificially low. As they are artificially low, there is no demand. The serious problem in this country is demand. In other words, there is low demand.
El problema que tiene este país es la demanda. O sea, hay baja demanda.
Este modelo económico con baja demanda
This
interna
economic model, with low domestic demand and dependent on a single sector, is extremely vulnerable, a condition aggravated by a historical dependency, the monopoly of the dollar since 1904. This makes the country hostage to external financing and the attraction of currency through investments, which in today's turbulent geopolitical context seems to impose more and more constraints than benefits.
beneficios.
La doctrina Monroe, a lo largo de su historia de más de 200
The
años,
Monroe Doctrine, throughout its history of more than 200 years, has simply not disappeared. It is the foundation, the pillar of US foreign policy, simply modified by certain names, and also from the perspective of each ruler. Why? Because when we look at the 19th century, we went from the big stick to dollar diplomacy. But it has not changed because dollar diplomacy, dollars instead of bullets, what it does is take greater advantage of the resources or raw materials of these underdeveloped countries, on the condition of applying trade measures to them. That is, I buy the raw material from you, but you buy the manufactured product from me.
o sea, yo te compro la materia prima, pero tú me compras el producto manufacturado.
Having an economy that depends exclusively on foreign debt to function in something as basic as paying the state payroll is extremely worrying. And at this moment, when we are in a state of high tension with the United States,
El impacto en la ciudadanía se vería en el
the
encarecimiento.
impact on citizens would be seen in the increase in the cost of credit. An increase in interest rates would leave thousands of families and businesses outside the financial system. And almost half of the Panamanian population, 2 million people, have debts that, in this scenario, could become partially or totally unpayable, according to data from the Panamanian Credit Association.
La Asociación Panameña de Crédito. Reca Chandiramani, TeleSUR, Ciudad de Panamá.
No debemos a usted.
We go now to culture, as in Venezuela from September 25th to October 4th, Caracas will host the third edition of the Turquía Film Festival. This event, organized by Circuito Gran Cine in collaboration with the Embassy of Turkey, will offer free screenings of 6 Turkish films. The program will include notable titles such as Honey, winner of the Golden Bear in Berlin, and Yozgat Blues, a melancholy comedy. Also, dramas like The Line of Doubt, a romantic comedy such as Oh Wow in its 2nd season, and My Father and My Son will be screened in communal spaces addressing family themes within a political context. And at the same time, Buenos Aires celebrates the 25th edition of the German Film Festival at Cinépolis Recoleta until September 24th, with a program that includes 16 films from restored classics to new releases. It is presented as a great celebration of German cinema, highlighting works such as Die Buddenbrook, a silent classic that will be screened with live music. In addition, the latest creations by renowned directors such as Andreas Dresen and Christian Petzold will be screened along with new talents emerging in German cinematography. The festival will also launch the Next Generation Short Tiger 2025 program, focused on highlighting the country's young talent. And in Asia, China sets the final details to celebrate the Shanghai International Light Festival 2025, which begins on September 19th. Previous to the start of this event, a jury selected 3 works as the winners of a contest in which 20 artistic creations competed. The chosen plays will be exhibited on the walls of the Jiangyuli and Jikumen historical neighborhood located in a Shanghai commercial complex. The artists highlighted in their creations the cultural knowledge of the country and the iconic traditional architecture of the place, connecting identity and the exchange of civilizations. Shanghai International Light Festival 2025 will conclude on October 18th.
The artistic teams and creators devoted great effort to crafting a holistic visual experience within the flat space. Their works reflect a deep understanding of China and Shanghai's iconic Shikumen architecture, while also showcasing the mutual learning and exchange of civilizations.
Now we have a short break coming up, but before, we invite you to visit our Facebook page at teleSUR English. There you'll be able to watch our top stories, special live coverages, and much more. Follow the page and activate notifications to stay up to date on the world's most recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. We continue with more information referring to United States Thursday's veto against the UN Security Council's ruling to create a resolution for a ceasefire agreement between Palestine and Israel. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed the need for recognition of the Palestinian state.
That there will be a clear demonstration that the overwhelming majority of the countries in the world recognize the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination, recognize that there must be a Palestinian state and recognize it in the meeting we'll have on Monday, and at the same time send a very clear message that the carnage that is happening in Gaza has to end, that we need a ceasefire immediately, with the release of all hostages immediately too, and with effective humanitarian aid in Gaza that is suffering the highest level of death and destruction that I've seen since I'm Secretary General.
And in this sense, the Chinese envoy to the United Nations, Fu Kong, sharply criticized the United States for vetoing the Security Council resolution calling for an immediate Gaza ceasefire and unimpeded humanitarian aid access. Fu expressed deep disappointment, insisting that military means cannot bring lasting peace and warning that the ongoing conflict only increases suffering and civilian casualties. The Chinese envoy urged Israel to halt its military operation immediately and called on all influential parties, including the U.S., to adopt an impartial approach and take concrete actions to end the fighting. Fu also reaffirmed China's support for the two-state solution as the only viable path to end the Palestinian crisis and declared China's readiness to work with the international community to resolve the humanitarian disaster in Gaza. Meanwhile, hundreds of UN staff rallied outside the organization's European headquarters in Geneva on September 18th to honor the more than 370 colleagues that were killed in Gaza since October of 2023, most of whom were serving with the UNRWA. The demonstration included the laying of white roses at a memorial, a moment of silence, and calls for the protection of humanitarian workers and respect for international law, with organizers emphasizing that the event was not political, but a tribute to fallen staff. The protest drew sharp criticism from the U.S. and Israeli officials, who argued it breached UN impartiality and called for disciplinary actions against the staff involved. UN management had recently reminded employees to avoid organizing activities that could be seen as political, reflecting heightened tensions and concerns over neutrality amid unprecedented losses among humanitarian personnel in Gaza.
20 UN staff have lost their lives. Families have been torn apart.
And the conference, Local Action for Global Challenges in Emerging Economies, kicked off on September 18th at the United Nations headquarters. The event focuses on engaging citizens and youth, promoting digital innovation, and localizing the Sustainable Development Goals amid growing climate crisis and global uncertainties. It brings together diverse stakeholders to explore creative solutions and governance innovations, emphasizing the systemic role of digital public infrastructure as a foundation for local multi-stakeholder action addressing global challenges. Speakers highlighted how DPI can enhance trust, transparency, and community empowerment in climate action, showcasing examples like Brazil's Rural Environmental Registry that supports sustainable land use.
This is not just a database, it's a tool for climate action, for transparency, and for empowering communities to be part of this solution. Now imagine scaling this approach globally. With the right digital foundations, we can unlock finance for local climate initiatives, share real-time environmental data across borders, and engage citizens, especially the youth, in building the low-carbon, climate-resilient future we all need.
And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok as well. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.